Hi, this is Kugito, and I'm back with another Through the Ages video. So last time we saw my first 3-player game in round 2 of the World Championships, where I managed to win against Sazmer and Cleveman. In this video, we're going to see my second 3-player game that finished. This, of course, is with Fat Hope, who currently is looking like my main competition in the group, so it's going to be a pretty important game, and the third player is Cleveman. So, without further ado, let's take a look. So before I talk about the card that I took, let's take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. So what stands out to me in Age 3 is there's a lot of lab synergy. We have, I think, all 3 leaders that specifically deal with labs, and labs only, Jobs, Gates, and Sid Meier, as well as a spaceflight and a Manhattan Project. Now there is a Gandhi to make the Manhattan Project kind of both better and worse. Wars are harder, but obviously Manhattan Project is a way to get strength without using military actions. There's also a Red Cross, always important to keep in mind. Notably, along with Gandhi, we also have all 3 theater/culture leaders, I guess culture leaders in Age 3, Darwin, Bach, and Shakespeare. So a culture-focused strategy may be worth pursuing, although Manhattan Project is a dangerous card for that sort of strategy. We also have all 4 power wonders in Age 2, notably, so it might be important to keep your wonder slot open for Age 2. As well as 2 military action leaders. We also have Maria to pair with Ocean Liner Service, and James Watt to pair with the Railroad. Harvard College might be good for a spaceflight strategy. In Age 1, we also have a bunch of good wonders, so a lot of strong wonders in general in this game makes iron a more important technology. I would say most of these leaders kind of prefer to be elected a bit later, but there are some that I find being elected earlier too. There's a little bit of a balance there. There's notably all 3 military-focused leaders, although also Nostradamus to hide behind if you don't have such a strong military. So kind of a balanced deck overall. As for my turn, I think the main choice I have is between Hammurabi and Library of Alexandria. That being said, this time I think it's a pretty straightforward choice. First of all, Hammurabi is literally the only leader on the row, so especially when playing first, if I don't take him, someone else will, and then it'll be kind of a struggle for me to take a leader. I probably will be without a leader in Age 2, because it won't be worth it to take 1 for 3 civil actions. That would be really bad. Hammurabi is also, in general, just a really great leader to have. Not only is he... I mean, there's also Confucius and Boudica, who are good leaders. Boudica doesn't really have a leader to punish her. That being said, it's not clear if they'll even be out of the deck, much less in a position for me to really take. And furthermore, Hammurabi, I think, is arguably better than them because of my 2 opponents, I imagine one of them will probably take Pyramids and the other will probably take Library of Alexandria, but that will leave Stonehenge for me. And I actually think, specifically when you have Hammurabi, Stonehenge is as good as Pyramids and Library. I think it's normally like a tier below, but with Hammurabi, it's on par with them. So with all those considerations, I think Hammurabi is definitely the right pick here. Cleveland goes with Pyramids. I think, Library plus Richland might be better because they are, kind of roughly equal wonders, and getting the extra rock is definitely really nice, but it's hard to argue with anyone picking Pyramids, frankly, so I think that's fine. Fat Hope is able to get Library plus 2 yellow cards, which is pretty good. Age 1 begins. My turn again is pretty straightforward. I do normal stuff, but I don't have to take Stonehenge right now. Both of my opponents have taken wonders. There's basically no chance of Stonehenge being discarded if I instead take this Engineering Genius. The way my opponents played, thankfully I'm able to get this Engineering Genius for only 2 civil actions, which is a relatively cheap price to pay with Hammurabi on turn 2. Like I said, there's essentially no way Stonehenge would be discarded. Cleveland would have to take 2 of these yellow cards. I didn't see that happening. Cleveland needs a leader. So I should be able to get Stonehenge for 1 civil action turn 1, along with this Engineering Genius. Seemed like an extremely strong start for me. I drew a Cultural Influence. Cleveland, of these leaders, decides to take Confucius. I think that is the best choice. And builds a mine. Fat Hope decides to take Aristotle as the only leader for 1 civil action, and otherwise does normal stuff. So for me, at this point, I do have a little bit of a decision to make because there is an early Universitas on the line, and a case could certainly be made to that taking this as your first wonder is more important than taking the Stonehenge. And I think if I didn't have the Engineering Genius, that would be a much more difficult decision to make between Stonehenge and Universitas. However, because I have this engineering genius, what I can do is just build 3 stages of Stonehenge instead. This does mean that I don't build an early lab, but with Stonehenge, give me a bunch of science. It's okay to delay the lab a bit. This also leaves me with an open worker for potential developments. And it means that next turn, if I want to, I can very easily finish the last stage of Stonehenge and grab Universitas and get both of them. So I figured that this was better than, you know, maybe taking Universitas for 2 civil actions and then maybe building a lab, and then I would have 2 civil actions left and not really clear things to do with them. Columbus is a bad leader on Hammurabi because I'm getting so few draws. You know, I could take one of these yellow cards for 2 civil actions, but that seemed pretty bad. You know, it's okay to be a little civil action inefficient with Hammurabi, but you don't want to be too civil action inefficient with him. For similar reason, I decided to give up on taking the iron. I mean, the iron could also, you know, be a defensible play, I think. Maybe take iron, take Stonehenge, maybe build a stage of Stonehenge or build a lab or something. That could definitely work. I think that, and I did consider that somewhat. But at the end of the day, and as I mentioned before, there are a lot of strong winners in this deck, which makes iron higher value than it usually is. However, I figured that this play was very strong in itself and very civil action efficient, and that made me slightly prefer it to taking the Universitas with the iron, which are definitely powerful cards, but spending a lot of civil actions on them felt not worth it compared to being able to just do this really easily. And with my last civil action, I'm also able to take this AJ Urban Growth. Not that, obviously, AJ yellow cards aren't the best, but in this case, I have yet to build my second lab, so I should almost certainly be able to use this during age 1. Yeah, I think, like I said, sticking Stonehenge, sticking iron, building a lab, could have definitely worked fine, but would be a lot of civil actions, so... As I said, Stonehenge, I think, is a very strong wonder when you have Hammurabi. So, I think while the iron play could be defended, I think the Stonehenge play is fine, too. I didn't seed because I didn't want to risk going into corruption. I draw an immigration, which is a good card to have with Stonehenge. Cleveland Seeds reveals development of politics. I draw an Enslave, a bonus card, and a Crusades off of it. The bonus card is nice for sure. Cleveland builds a second lab and takes a reserve and takes 2 yellow cards. Not the most exciting of turns, but I think it's fine. I mean, iron for 3 civil actions, hard to justify. So, you know, I probably would have increased my population instead of taking this reserves. It's just, but Cleveland does have the pyramids, so the high civil action cost of reserves is offset by that. Fat Hope Seeds reveals the development of agriculture. Fat Hope, at least Cleveland was able to keep the iron in 2 civil actions for Fat Hope, who does take the iron, builds a lab, and increases the population. Seems like a fine turn. And Fat Hope plays a Phalanx to keep 2 cards in their hand. So it's my turn. Now, this was a pretty interesting turn for me, because... oh yeah, first of all, it looks like my opponents managed to get the Universitas discarded, which was not something I expected them to be able to do, because I didn't expect them to take so many cards. I didn't expect Cleveland to take so many cards. So maybe that was another reason why Cleveland took these 2 yellow cards, was to force the Universitas to be discarded before my turn. So that was a cost of the Stonehenge play that I didn't really consider when I made it. That being said, we can see there are the other strong wonders on the row anyway, so it's not a problem. But this turn, I actually thought pretty hard about what I wanted to do. I mean, I definitely wanted to take the Monarchy, a card that's very good with both Stonehenge and Hammurabi. But now the question that I ask myself is, do I want to just play the Monarchy this turn, or do I want to try to set up a revolution next turn? And I saw a way to get what I thought was a pretty strong Monarchy revolution next turn. So I think I'll talk a bit more about it when we get there. But first we'll see how I set it up, where I also took Barbarossa. Now, Barbarossa, I think in general, is a very strong leader, and I think I'm set up pretty well for him. I have the 3rd military action with the Monarchy. I am not gonna be taking irrigation. Yeah, definitely not taking irrigation. So I'm missing food income, but I do have a fair amount of food stacked up. I'll be able to use his ability several times. So, and like I said, overall he's strong, but he's also particularly strong for me because I need, the main reason I took him, I guess I'll say it right now. My plan is to take the Taj Mahal next turn. I want to talk about the Taj Mahal more next turn when I actually take it. Where, I guess I should talk about it now, because the Taj Mahal was one major reason I took Barbarossa here. So, the Taj Mahal is an interesting wonder. It's normally considered the worst Age 1 wonder by a fair amount, and I think a lot of people, like, never take it. Which is understandable, because it kind of goes against most of the general principles of Through the Ages play, which is in Age 1, right? In Age 1 and Age 2, you want to put up your economy, and then focus on culture in Age 3. Taj Mahal, you know, it gives you a blue cube, which is nice, but the main benefit of it is just to give you culture. So it's like an Age 1 card that only gives you culture, which is generally not where you want to be. That being said, the main strength of the card is that you can take it for free, right? If you replace your leader, then you'll get it, and it's on this part of the row, then you'll take it for 0 civil actions. And that's a very powerful strength. One of the major costs of wonders in general is that they cost a lot of civil actions to take, and then also to complete, obviously. Taj Mahal costs the least of any wonder except for Colossus in terms of total civil actions you have to spend, because you only have to spend 3 civil actions total. One way of thinking of it is it's kind of like an opera, right? You're spending 8 rocks for 3 cultural turn, except it's an opera that actually costs less civil actions, right? An opera costs 4 if you take it, play it, increase your population, and build one. Taj Mahal only costs 3, and it also doesn't cost population. So looking at it that way, it's actually pretty good. Another way to look at it is that, while you generally don't want to push culture in the early games, because it's better to build the economy first, not having much culture by the time Age 3 rolls around can oftentimes be a problem too. Definitely I've noticed myself, you know, I sort of learned gameplay by watching a lot of Vitamin videos, and Vitamin is a very economy-focused player. But what I found is, you know, when I focus just on my economy and ignore culture, I oftentimes enter Age 3 at a pretty significant culture deficit. And certainly you can make that up a lot of times in Age 3, but it is a real problem. And I've definitely had some games where I just was not able to convert my economy into culture in time. So something like a Taj Mahal, which is gonna provide, you know, probably something along the lines of 15, 18, 21 culture by the end of the game. That can definitely add up, and that can help you. You know, the fact that it costs 0 civil actions is the main thing here. You're not spending a lot of civil actions on it. You're just spending rocks, and you'll often have the rocks to spend on it anyway. I mean, sort of one of the major uses of any wonder is that it provides a way to spend resources without needing extra population. Taj Mahal does that as well as any other wonder does. Anyway, everything that I'm saying here is to say that while I don't think Taj Mahal is, like, great or anything, I have kind of changed my view on it, and I guess I'll also give a little back scenes info. One of the major reasons that I changed my view on Taj Mahal is because of one of my friends, Iren, who, if you don't know, is one of the best Through the Ages players in the world, I would say. He doesn't play much anymore because he puts a lot of time into his turns and doesn't have that much time anymore, but we have been playing together in the team tournament, both the last team tournament and this one. He's actually the person who got me into Through the Ages in the first place, so you have him to blame. But we talked some about Taj Mahal. You know, I actually you know, didn't really talk to him about the Asia strategy until we did the team tournament together. But since doing the team tournament, you know, obviously we've talked a fair bit, including about Taj Mahal, and, you know, that, you know, the fact that such a strong player, you know, thinks Taj Mahal, again, it's not like he thinks it's the best wonder or anything, but that it's, like, pretty good and, like, not, you know, kind of on a similar level to the other Age 1 wonders, made me reevaluate it some, and, you know, encouraged me to take it more than I used to, which was basically 0 times. And I do think that in this situation, it's maybe at its potential best. We'll see it more next turn again, but it'll basically allow me to do a revolution while also taking a wonder. We can see that all the age 1 wonders are on the row right now. So if I want to do a monarchy revolution next turn, the Taj Mahal is the only age 1 wonder I can possibly take. And if you think about it that way, then the Taj Mahal is not, you know, is not just giving me 3 culture, it's like, it's saving me 6 science, right? Because I'm able to do the monarchy revolution while getting an age 1 wonder, which, were it not for the Taj Mahal, would not be possible. And so if you think of this as being like, also get 6 science, right? Which it basically will be for me, then it gets significantly better, obviously. So because of that, I felt that this was a situation where Taj Mahal is at its best. So I felt comfortable taking Barbarossa here, who's a good leader for me anyway, but, you know, planning to replace Hammurabi with him next turn so I can take Taj Mahal while doing my revolution. Otherwise, to set up my revolution, I needed to finish the Stonehenge, both to get those blue tokens off of it and to have an open window space for the Taj Mahal, as well as build my second lab, again, you know, both to have it and also to spend my blue cubes and increase my population. Setting up like this, I will be able to potentially use Barbarossa's ability twice next turn if I have to, but I think I probably shouldn't have to. I will anyway have a free civil action to potentially do something with, if I need to. As for discards, oh yeah, again, I didn't see anything this turn, so that I wouldn't risk being in corruption, and I think I keep the immigration because I have Stonehenge, which makes it more likely I can win it. Yep. And I draw rats, interesting card. Cleveland Seeds reveals the development of civil life. Increases the population, builds one stage of the pyramids, and takes an irrigation and a cultural heritage. Cultural heritage may be a bit questionable. You do have 5 civil actions soon with the pyramids, though, so that justifies it somewhat more. Cleveland, unfortunately, even with the reserves, would not be able to finish the pyramids this turn. Maybe the frugality would have been better than the cultural heritage, though. At least, even if Cleveland had taken frugality, the Taj Mahal would not have been discarded. Fatep does not see it. Instead, they upgrade a mine as well as take the Code of Laws. I think this play makes sense. Yeah, now we can talk about my play. I do decide to cede the immigration here because I plotted out my turn, and even if a resource event gets revealed, I would be able to stay out of corruption again, I think, by using Barbarossa's ability twice. Instead, development of planning is revealed. And development of planning, the options were warfare, religion, and settlement. So this was, even though I had a clear plan for this turn, which was to do the monarchy revolution, which I do end up doing, as you can see, it actually took me a while to work out exactly what I wanted to do with this turn, because I have a surprising amount of options for it, both with the development of civil life that I have to decide what to do with, as well as which planning event to take, as well as do I even want to do the revolution at all or not. The basic issue kind of came with the civil life, because my only options for development of civil life were increase my population with it, play the monarchy with it, or build a mine or farm with it. You can see I actually ended up building the farm, but I'll talk about that later. I don't want to increase my population with it because I, have Barbarossa. Like, I already have a free population anyway. This is kind of the only free population I'll want for a while. Everything else I'm going to want to put into military, which means I'll want to use Barbarossa's ability for it. So I didn't want to increase my population with the development of civil life, especially with the potential development of settlement coming. I also didn't want to play a monarchy with it. I mean, I could play a monarchy peacefully with the development of civil life, but again, I had set up this turn to do a revolution. Now, I didn't have to. I mean, there's still Great Wall and Himeji Castle, which are both strong wonders to take, I think. So I could have just done a revolution peacefully and, taken one of these wonders. I did consider that for a while. The problem, though, is that, like, let's say I did the revolution peacefully with the civil life, spend 2 civil actions on one of these, I would now have 3 civil actions left, or even 4 civil actions left with Hammurabi, and not really any great thing to do with them. I could take the Masonry. I do actually end up taking the Masonry. We'll talk about that later. But even with the Masonry, that would still leave me with 3 civil actions. Like, I could take 2 yellow cards, but that felt like, you know, do I really want to take 2 yellow cards instead of doing the revolution? Like, doing the revolution saves me 6 science, I guess 5 science because of civil life, but 5 science is a lot. It's definitely more valuable, I think, than this breakthrough plus reserves. But then if I do a revolution with the development of civil life, which I could certainly do, that kind of ruins the main benefit of development of civil life, which is it saves you a civil action. Doing a revolution off of it doesn't save you the civil action because you spend all your civil actions. It only saves you the 1 science. So it doesn't really want to do that either. And so I was thinking, you know, maybe increase my population with it, and then maybe I could take religion or warfare with the development of planning, but development of settlement is, I think, the best development by a pretty significant margin, because it saves you a civil action and 3 food usually, which is way more than the other developments give you. Even religion and warfare, which are also good developments, neither of those save you civil actions. So I kind of really wanted to take development of settlement, but if I take development of settlement, then I really didn't want to increase my population with civil life. And so I was prevaricating over what to do until I sort of realized, why don't I just build a 3rd farm with the development of civil life? I'm probably don't build a 3rd farm, frankly, as much as I should. I'm not saying that you should do it in a majority of games, but I think when I look at top-level players, they certainly do it more often than I do. Regardless, though, this seemed like definitely the right time to do it. Not only can I do it very easily with the development of civil life, and again, it's kind of what I would most want to do with development of civil life. It's also obviously really good with Barbarossa. It means that I should be able to get a fair amount of Barbarossa activations even without an irrigation. Not to mention that, you know, getting to do it for no civil actions this turn when I want to do the revolution seems especially good. It is a way to, you know, spend at least 1 blue cube, which I think I don't need to do to get out of revolution anyway, but still. I can do it while still doing the revolution. That seemed really good. And so once I realized this option, it seemed definitely the best, where I can use the civil life to build a farm, save a rock on it. I can take development of settlement to get a free population here, which I will need eventually, you know, once I get farther into my yellow bank and need happy faces. But then once I do this, I won't need to increase my population again for a long time. I can just use Barbarossa ability, and still go with my plan this turn, which was use the Barbarossa ability to get out of corruption, take the Taj Mahal for free because I replaced my leader this turn, and still have 1 civil action left that I can use to take the Masonry, which was a little disappointing to take this when I had already finished Stonehenge, obviously. That being said, it's still very nice to have the Masonry before I've built any urban buildings beyond just the 2nd AJ lab. This should save me a pretty large amount of rocks as the game goes on, and at least, you know, 1 or, you know, 2, maybe 3 civil actions. You know, less civil actions than if I had played it before I got the Stonehenge, but also having so much science from Stonehenge makes it much easier to justify the science spent on Masonry. So, while it took me a while to find this line, once I found it, this felt clearly the best line to take. I have so much science, it sort of jumpstarts my position significantly, giving me a monarchy, getting a wonder that I can sink my rocks into. Just overall, my position felt much stronger and more stable with this line than with any of the other lines I found. And again, still having so much science for potential could have laws or whatever else I might want, just felt really nice. And I drew a phalanx. And tactic was kind of the last thing I needed in Age 1, honestly. Anyway, Cleveland Seeds reveals the development of markets. Cleveland finishes pyramids, takes the 2nd monarchy, but doesn't play it this turn. Instead, they get some farm protection going, which makes sense, which I think is a justifiable decision for sure. Faso finishes the library and takes abundant circuses for Happy Face solution. That also is a sensible turn, I think. It's my turn. I decide to seed the rats. It's might seem kinda counterintuitive to seed rats when you're on Barbarossa, but I actually think in some ways Barbarossa makes rats better, or at least knowing that Rats is coming is the important part, right? Because I know Rats is in the deck, I know to play around it. And Barbarossa, I actually think makes it easier to play around Rats in a lot of ways, because he makes it so much easier to spend your food. And with me having 3 farms, even though that means that I may fall victim to the Rats, it will also make it easier for me to recover from the Rats, potentially, than my opponents. Well, maybe not Cleveland, but Cleveland, you know, will probably have more trouble spending food than I will, so Cleveland should get hit by it pretty hard, and Fat Hope might also get hit by it if they don't play around it sufficiently. So, I also just wanted to seed in general, because I'm strongest this turn, so, yeah, that's why I seeded the Rats. I will Immigration. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be the sole victor of it, thanks to Cleveland getting the Development of Religion. Definitely that's a cost to me of not taking Development of Religion, but I think overall it's still fine. At least I am a party to it, so I'm able to get 1 more population, which again should be helpful once I start delving into my yellow bank. As for what to do this turn, there may be a various few options, but I think the best option is probably the one I went with, which is just upgrade 2 labs with the masonry, and then get out of corruption by using Barbarossa's ability. This does use up all 5 of my civil actions, so definitely I pass up some potentially helpful cards, particularly the breakthroughs. That being said, I have a lot of science with me doing the revolution, having Stonehenge, getting these alchemies going, so breakthrough I think is less value for me than it usually is. I could maybe try to cut it for Cleveland, but Cleveland has also been on Confucius, also has the cultural heritage, so the breakthrough also maybe less value than it usually is for Cleveland. And it's also just, this is a very clean play for me, very civil action efficient, getting these alchemies going already. I would have had to delay an alchemy upgrade to take the breakthrough, so it would have only been a 1 science breakthrough. That felt really bad. I'm passing up the swordsman, but I have a nice tactic anyway, so passing up the theology, but I figured I shouldn't need it again with my happy face from Stonehenge. So overall, this turn feels pretty straightforward to me. I draw another tactic as well as a Reign of Terror. Cleveland Seeds reveals a scientific breakthrough. I am rewarded even more for building those alchemies. Cleveland does a revolution of their own, actually, and is able to get out of corruption, so that seems like a nice play. Fat Hope increases the population, takes the knights for their failings tactic. At least Cleveland left the knights on 2 civil actions for Fat Hope. Finishes the failings tactic. As for my turn, I decide not to seed. Mainly because I was pretty scared of Rebellion. I think, yeah, Fat Hope Cleveland had seeded most of these cards, and Rebellion very definitely could be among them. And if a Rebellion was revealed, it would mess up this coming turn of mine pretty significantly, which is taking this Knights for 3 civil actions. Pretty expensive to take the Knights, but I really wanted to... But there were 2 reasons I decided to go for it. First of all, I really just wanted to fix my strength situation this turn. You know, I'm behind Fat Hope. Fat Hope could even... Well, I would be able to defend against an aggression from Fat Hope at least, even if Fat Hope tried one. But still, I wanted to compete and strengthen Fat Hope. The sooner the better. And second of all, I just didn't see anything else particularly to do with my civil actions, aside from the last one that I'll have, which I believe I'll take the Bread and Circuses with it. We'll talk about that in a bit. But after taking Bread and Circuses, I didn't, you know, maybe the cartography, but taking the cartography for 2 civil actions, when I don't have any knowledge of any colonies, didn't feel the best. These other yellow cards, you know, maybe rich land, but, you know, they're not too exciting, so it felt like I wasn't giving up that much by just taking these knights for 3 civil actions. And I was able, again, to... Also, another reason is, I didn't really have a great way to get out of corruption, except by doing this. I think maybe I could have gotten out of corruption by just building a Bread and Circuses. Let's try to find out. So I spent... No, yeah. Just building a Bread and Circuses by itself would not have gotten me out of corruption. I would have... Because I wouldn't have spent the 3 food. So if I had just built the Bread and Circuses, I still would have had to use Barbarossa's ability to get out of corruption. I didn't want to use Barbarossa's ability to get a 4th warrior. I wanted to get a knight with that 4th one. So that's ultimately, I think, what made me decide I really wanted to get the Knights this turn, and if I had seeded and revealed that Rebellion, then I wouldn't have been able to take the Knights and play it. So that's why I did that. With my last level action, you know, you could make a case, probably not for Frugality, because I probably just want to use Barbarossa's ability a lot in the coming turns. Maybe for the Rich Land, but I thought that pretty soon I would need the Bread and Circuses, because I'm going to be using Barbarossa's ability a lot. So actually, after the age ends, the next time... I guess the next time I use Barbarossa's ability, I'll have, you know, both of these will be unhappy. So, I mean, that... You know, that could be fine, but if there's a Rebellion in the deck and I lose, you know, losing 2 civil actions to Rebellion is not good, but it's not the end of the world. Losing 4 civil actions to Rebellion is kind of the end of the world. So that just felt too risky to me. Bread and Circuses, I think, is also just a good card. I can get them for cheap with Masonry. There's Pierre in the deck, so that's why I went with the Bread and Circuses. I draw another bonus card. Cleveman does not seed, notably. Instead, takes Genghis Khan, as well as Swordsman. Unsurprisingly, has the heavy cavalry to pair with Genghis Khan, and is able to upgrade 2 to now become strongest. Probably, maybe there's a strength event, kind of a tell. There's probably a strength event in the deck, which is why Cleveman didn't seed this turn. Also increases the population, notably, instead of, say, upgrading a farm. Maybe they need like a corruption, I didn't check, but that also might possibly be a tell that there's a pestilence in the deck. Fat Hope takes Jan Ziska over Gutenberg to help with their strength situation. Also builds up Bread and Circuses. Looks either Fat Hope seeded Rebellion, or probably more likely is, like me, worried about a potential Rebellion. Luckily, Fat Hope is still going to be the weakest on my turn. So, I guess, contrary to my previous worries, I decided to risk the Rebellion this turn. But I mean, yeah. Obviously, it would have been pretty bad if Rebellion were revealed. Maybe I shouldn't have risked this in retrospect, and that was a mistake. Obviously, you know, it's nice to seed while you're not weakest and stuff, but I think maybe seeding while risking Rebellion like this wasn't the best of ideas. I can't recall my exact logic. I think I might have just forgotten that I was worried about Rebellion, frankly. But I was not punished. It's not Rebellion. Instead, I am able to take the Code of Laws. I definitely have the science for it. Always very nice to have Code of Laws with Monarchy. 6 civil actions is, I think, significantly better than 5, and you can potentially just survive off of this to the end of the game, even. That is as much, though, as I'm willing to risk on the Rebellion, so I decided to also build an arena. This also gets me out of corruption, so it's kind of, I think, an obvious thing to do, but I don't see many other options. Rather, it's just a matter of what do I want to do with my remaining 2 civil actions, and I decided to take the Engineering Genius. Yeah, I mean, I don't really see a better use. I guess I could have maybe taken the Rich Land and floated my last civil action. The Engineering Genius pairs kind of badly with the Masonry here, because if I use the Engineering Genius on the Taj Mahal efficiently on the 4 stage, then I won't be able to use the Masonry to build 2 stages at once. So that's kind of annoying. That being said, I do have this immediate use for the Engineering Genius. It's obviously a bit higher card than the Rich Land. And even if I took the Rich Land, you know, I can't take Alchemy. I don't want Theocracy. I can't take Gutenberg. I have nothing else really to do. I mean, I could build a second Bread and Circuses. I guess that is justifiable because it would make me strongest over Cleveman, right? And I'd probably want the second Bread and Circuses eventually anyway, because I'm going to be eating a lot into my yellow bank with Barbarossa. So I think taking the Rich Land and building a second Bread and Circuses would have probably been better. It would have made me more vulnerable to Pestilence, though, which, again, maybe there's a Pestilence in the deck because of how Cleveland played their turn. So there's that consideration, too, but maybe being more civil action efficient and, you know, the issue with the Masonry, the Rich Land I will definitely be using either an iron or coal at some point. So Yeah, I think maybe Richland build Bread and Circuses would have been better. Anyway, I draw an aggression, a bonus card, and a scientific cooperation. Cleveland Seeds reveals a coat of arms, so yeah, I'm definitely punished by not building that second Bread and Circuses. I am hit by it, at least I am not hit by it as much as Fat Hope is. Cleveland decides to take this iron, upgrades 1, and takes a patriotism. Fat Hope upgrades 1 iron mine, also takes a scientific method, and upgrades the second. This looks like a good turn to me. It's also all that Fat Hope can do because they were hit by the coat of arms. It's my turn, so I didn't have any event to see, so I decided to try the scientific cooperation. I actually offered it, not really expecting it to be accepted. I considered offering it to Fat Hope, but once Fat Hope upgrades both scientific methods, they'll be at 7 science production, whereas I would only be at 4. Maybe it was still worth doing. I confess there was also a bit of a group consideration where, as we saw earlier, Fat Hope is my major competition in the group right now. So, you know, giving Fat Hope a pact that it looked like Fat Hope would take more advantage of than me, because they would have more science income than me, didn't feel smart. Cleveland only being on 2 science income, it felt to me unlikely that Cleveland would accept the pact, but I figured, you know, might as well offer it, can't hurt, because I don't have any events to seed. I was somewhat surprised that Cleveland actually ended up accepting the pact. It's obviously a strong pact to accept, but, you know, I have 4 science income, Cleveland has 2. Cleveland doesn't have the cultural heritage, though, so you can make a case for it. But I was definitely, a little bit surprised, and, you know, it's good for me, definitely, that Cleveland accepts the pact. Means that, for example, I am able to play the strategy this turn, to make me strongest and let me keep more of these cards. So that's that feels pretty right to me. The next question is, what else to do with my civil actions. I think now I do actually, well, one thing I can do is I have enough food to use Barbarossa's ability again, and I can play the medieval army. This was something I was planning to do anyway. By being able to play the strategy this turn, I'm able to do this while still drawing 3 cards. That's very strong. I jump a lot in strength by doing this. And with my remaining 3 civil actions, you know, I could take one of these leaders. Maria seems kind of questionable. You know, at this point I have, you know, 0 farm income. So I do want to replace Barbarossa sooner than later because it looks like I've exhausted him at this point. But Maria didn't feel good with me probably not being able to pop again for a very long time. Bach, I wasn't really set up for. Jarwin could definitely potentially be good, but, you know, not that good, you know, because again, I don't have any, I won't have any free population for a while, basically, so he's probably only going to give me 2 culture production and the civil action discounts, which is certainly not bad, but there's other potential leaders, and in particular, at this point, I think I was looking at James Watt, because I am going to be the player who needs coals. I mean, you know, when you need coals and James Watt is in the deck, I think it's always good to at least, you know, leave yourself open for James Watt, if possible. And so it felt that since Maria, Bach, and Darwin, none of them seemed like particularly great for me, I thought it was better to just wait and hope to get Watt sooner. So instead of taking one of these leaders, I decided to just use my civil actions by, first of all, putting this arena to, again, avoid rebellion, and just as a way to spend a civil action while taking these 2 yellow cards. The efficient upgrade will definitely be directly useful as soon as I upgrade my farms or my mines, which will hopefully be relatively soon, depending on the card row. Wave of Nationalism is a little harder to see when I might be able to use it, but I had one last civil action to use. I definitely wanted the efficient upgrade, and so having it is better than not having it. And maybe at some point you can usually find a turn to use it, like when you replace your tactics in particular. And I draw another aggression, an inhabited territory, and a prosperity. Cleveland does not see it. Instead, they take the rifleman, which, you know, they already have swordsmen, so it's less necessary, but it's definitely not bad to have. Cleveland can use it to recover a bit, to compete a bit more with me in strength. as well as take a cannon, so a very military-focused turn from Cleveland. That doesn't mean they sacrificed economy upgrades, though. Fat Hope, interestingly, proposes the International Trade Agreement to me. I was like when Cleveland accepted my scientific cooperation, I confess I was surprised that this was offered to me and not Cleveland, but I didn't say no. Fat Hope upgrades a farm, and destroys a lab to build a knight. So we can see that my strength push here has cost Fat Hope a pretty substantial amount. While costing me pretty much nothing, so that was nice. I see the prosperity. You know, I've exhausted my food supplies. The prosperity should give me one more population, which seems strong. I revealed the Confucius event, so no rebellions actually. This turn, I decided to go ahead and replace Barbarossa. You know, again, like I could try to wait for Watt, but we can see the first copy of Coal is on the row. I didn't take it this turn. I considered I am actually able, thanks to the sense of cooperation, to take it, play it, and upgrade the mine this turn. I definitely highly considered that. However, you know, both of my opponents have already upgraded iron mines. It seemed unlikely that they would take it just to cut it from me. It's always possible, but they also don't have, you know, Fat Hope is the one who would be more likely to cut it, and Fat Hope only has 5 civil actions, so I thought that it was very likely that the coal would be available to me next turn for 1 civil action. It still wouldn't be bad to take it, obviously, just to get the upgrades going sooner, but I thought that Napoleon also seemed like a good, strong card for me to take. Again, Barbarossa is literally doing nothing for me right now, so ideally I would like to replace him sooner, and since you know, if I took the coal this turn and upgraded it, then I probably wouldn't want James Watt anyway. Robespierre, and now, you know, Darwin, Bach, and Maria have already been discarded. Robespierre, I didn't really want. I'm voting on monarchy. Shakespeare, I'm not set up for at all. I don't have any free population or anything. So of the 4 leaders left in the deck, Napoleon is the only one who provides kind of any value to me at all, except I guess the happy face from Shakespeare. And what would provide like a little rocks. I mean, he wouldn't be bad, but it definitely seemed to me much better to just get Napoleon here, especially again since my age 1 leader is not doing anything for me anymore. So that's why I decided to take Napoleon, putting even more pressure on my opponents. As for my remaining civil actions, I didn't really want any of these cards too much, so I decided to just go ahead and finish the Taj Mahal with my engineering genius, leaving my window slot open in case I could get a railroad next turn. Or maybe Ocean Liner Service or Harvard College potentially, and just, you know, this seemed like a good opportunity to finish it when I didn't really have anything better to do on my civilization or any other cards I wanted to take. I discarded the fortifications tactic that I'm definitely not going to use, and I drew another bonus card, a War and Territory, and a Spy. Cleveland plays our reserves for rocks, takes a cavalryman, so Cleveland now has all 3 H2 military techs, and also the Suez Canal presumably has a good colony in hand. Suez Canal for only 1 rock isn't the best, but I think especially if it's a very high value colony, it's not awful. And Cleveland maybe doesn't have much better to do, although Cleveland increasing the population instead of upgrading mine may be a little questionable, but they also might be scared of rats, which is reasonable because I have actually, as we know, I seeded rats into this deck, and I managed to spend all my food before it's revealed, which worked out well for me. So considering that, pretty good play from Cleveland. Fat Hope Seeds reveals a Reign of Terror that hits Cleveland, unfortunately for them. Fat Hope decides to take the Ocean Liner Service instead of the railroad. That definitely makes sense to me. Fat Hope is only on 1 farm. I'm not sure when that happened. But, you know. Oh, sorry. Cleveland has the selective breedings. That's just covered by this text right now. So, yeah, Cleveland is not necessarily hurting from income, but obviously Ocean Liner Service is always high value wonder. In addition, in this game, there's the Red Cross, and when the Red Cross exists, Ocean Liner Service plus selective breedings becomes much more powerful. So I think this is definitely a defensible play. Does mean that Fat Hope maybe risks the Kanmons being cut, but I'm already on Monarchy. Cleveland and I are both already on Monarchies, so it's probably very unlikely that they'll both be cut, although this Kanmon might be discarded before Fat Hope's turn. But still, it would cost us both a fair amount to cut the Kanmon just from Fat Hope, so I think that's fine. And Fat Hope builds a third knight to compete with me more in strength. I did consider just seeing the territory, but this time I actually try a plunder on Cleveland, because if the plunder hits, that would let me upgrade a second coal mine this turn. So this plunder would basically be giving me 7 rocks, so like an age 3 plunder almost, and that felt like very worth it if the plunder hit. So that's why I tried the plunder. Also the territory, you know, would be fine for me, but because I'm already kind of at the, as we'll see, I'm actually not planning to take this copy of Selective Breeding. I'll talk about this later. The inhabited territory wouldn't be as good for me as it usually is, because I would probably only be on this 3 food income for it. So that's why I decided the plunder first instead. Just, you know, also kind of keep Cleveland honest, show that I'm willing to try to call bluffs potentially. It wasn't a bluff though. Cleveland is able to defend the aggression. I still obviously want to upgrade a coal mine, but now this left me with a pretty tough decision, which was, do I want to take the Selective Breeding, or do I want to take the Railroad? Obviously, when you're on coal mines, a Railroad is a particularly strong wonder to have. But this is also the second copy of Selective Breeding, because Fat Hope took the first. So if I pass up this copy of Selective Breeding, then I won't have any. I'll either be forced to just stay on these 3 AJ farms, or maybe wait for a mechanized agriculture. And that was definitely a tough decision, and I spent a little while on it. I mean, I could take both, but then I wouldn't be able to upgrade the coal mine, and that felt bad, costing me 2 rocks. So again, I spent a fair amount of time on this decision, but in the end, I decided to pass up the Selective Breeding, mainly because of how deep I already am in my yellow bank. And I already seeded the Prosperity, right? So after the age ends, I'll lose these 2 yellow tokens. With the Prosperity, I'll get this one, which means that the Selective Breeding, the next population it would get me, would be unhappy. I would have to wait for the population after that to be happy, and this is the 7 cost population, right? So it would actually take like a fair amount of time for Selective Breeding to provide real value to me. And even then it would only be like 1 population, and that's like a lot of civil action and resources to put into technology. It would only get me 1 more free population. Now, I do have the inhabited territory in hand, and if I seed and win the inhabited territory, then the Selective Breedings would definitely become much more useful. But I can't necessarily know. I mean, I do have a lot of bonus cards, but only 2 age 2 ones. These age 1 bonus cards will be gone by the end of the age. You know, Cleveland has a Suez Canal too. They only have 2. I did force them to discard some bonus cards, but they're also incentivized to try to put a lot of resources into a territory. Maybe Fat Hope has some bonus cards. Maybe one of my opponents will take the navigation. They were just, you know, I can never guarantee being able to win this inhabited territory. And if I don't win the inhabited territory, or maybe a potential vast that someone seeded, then it just felt like the Selective Breedings would not provide enough value really to be worth it. Certainly not to be better than the Railroad, which is not only going to provide more resources, but importantly is going to provide me 5 more strength without needing the free population. So if you think about it, the Selective Breeding free population, you know, what that would provide me, it would probably go into the military and provide me with maybe as much or even less strength than I could get from this Railroad, which does not cost me any science and will pay back the rocks I put into it. So, that's why I felt that the Railroad is better for me than the Breeding, my yellow token situation. I decided to discard a raid because it looks like a pretty low value aggression at this point in time, and also one of my age 1 bonus cards, which I'm probably not going to be able to use before the age ends anyway, although you can never know for sure. And I draw 2 more events, a Ravages of Time in the Cold War, as well as another raid. And Cleveland finishes the Suez Canal. It looks like they got a developed territory with it, so that's definitely a very strong territory to have, especially when Cleveland is a party to the scientific cooperation. So that definitely makes the Suez Canal, I think, pretty justifiable. Cleveland, interestingly, does cut the Kanman from Fat Hope. I'm not sure how much this was a denial and how much was Cleveland taking it for themselves. I mean, they are already on the monarchy, so it's not too good for them, but it's still a little better at least. Although it does, I think, especially when you have to put it in the scientific cooperation, like, this is going to make it much harder for Cleveland to play more techs. So I think probably it wasn't worth it. But it does, obviously, you know, make the situation better. Fat Hope Seeds reveals rats. This hurts Fat Hope the most and hurts me not at all, so this ended up being a very high value card for me to seed. Was happy that my play was rewarded. Fat Hope takes Robespierre, definitely the best Age 2 leader for them. They really need a government form, and gets out of corruption by building one stage of their wonder. Maybe, however, Fat Hope didn't have to take Robespierre this turn, because Cleveland already played their H2 government, so Robespierre would probably be very, very likely be available for them for one civil action on the following turn. Anyway, I decided to go for the war in territory. I mean, maybe I should have ceded instead. It was kind of a close decision. Cold War obviously could be very good for me, especially on the scientific cooperation. Ravages of Time would be kind of bad for Cleveland. Fat Hope, maybe not as bad though. And I felt that Fat Hope was probably in a better situation than Cleveland, just because their economy is stronger once they get a government form, and they have, you know, they have the ocean liner service and stuff. Cleveland will also be in a kind of a rough spot after losing Genghis Khan. But I decided that this war is also pretty good because Cleveland will be losing Genghis Khan before my next turn, which means probably the best they'll be able to do is build a cavalryman and then switch to phalanx, which will put them at 15 strength, and I'll be able to get 2 yellow tokens from them. My yellow token bank is kind of the weakest part of my civilization, arguably the only weak part of my civilization at this point, frankly. And so getting a few more yellow tokens seemed probably worth it. Unfortunately, getting more yellow tokens also means that me passing up the selective breeding last turn gets punished, because after this war I'll have the yellow tokens that the selective breeding would actually be useful. But I mean, I could still get like mechanized agriculture or something later in the game, so it still felt like a good, you know, obviously always better to have the yellow tokens than not to have them. Kind of a close decision, maybe. Anyway, after upgrading my mine, I took an engineering genius. Again, not good synergy with the masonry, and it's also, you know, it'll only give me save me 3 rocks with the railroad, but I didn't really have other yellow cards I wanted instead after also taking the rich land for my final mine upgrade. I didn't, you know, I could have taken the cavalryman just an H2 tech, but that would be about it, and that didn't feel super exciting to me either. So I just decided to take the engineering genius along with the rich land. Another reason to do this, by the way, is that it means, what does it mean? Oh yeah, another reason to take the engineering genius is because it'll let me finish the railroad next turn. So I think because this gives me direct benefit next turn, that was decisive in me taking it. Again, along with the rich land for the final mine upgrades, or farm upgrades later. A case could be made that I might want to destroy this mine, because I'll have 9 income anyway with the railroad. We can decide that later. But I also took the urban growth. I don't have an immediate use for it, but I figured, you know, I'll probably want some more urban buildings in Age 3. So only one civil action. I didn't want any, you know, I didn't want the opera or the journalism. I'm probably not gonna have a free population soon. So yeah. I discarded the raid for reasons already stated, and my last Age 1 card in my hand. I draw an Independence Declaration. Classic army tactic, probably the best tactic I could have drawn, so that was fortunate, as well as a bonus card. Cleveland does what I suggested before, which was build a cavalryman. Unfortunately, I think the only age 1 leader left for them, well, Shakespeare or Watt, both of who Watt would also be really bad for them. Maybe Cleveland could have waited for Watt instead, just to maybe hope for mechanized agricultural oil with him. That being said, the happy face from Shakespeare is actually going to be directly beneficial to them now. As we can see, Cleveland would have had some trouble with uprising without this Shakespeare happy face, so that probably justifies taking Shakespeare. Maybe though, taking him for 3 civil actions, like taking a leader for 3 civil actions, is 1 civil action more than taking him for 1 civil action and then playing him to an empty slot, right? So maybe because Fat Hope and I already have our H2 leaders, Cleveland could have considered waiting a turn to take Shakespeare and instead taking other cards. Fat Hope Seats reveals a foray. I am a party to it, obviously. Unfortunately, this misses Cleveland too. Fat Hope takes the 2nd Rifleman, so unfortunately both Riflemen are going to be gone. I'm going to need to depend on modern infantry for this classic army tactic. Fat Hope adopts the medieval army tactic, replaces Ziska with Robespierre, because Ziska will die by the end of the turn anyway, and also finish the Ocean Line service. Interestingly, Fat Hope chooses not to do the Republic Revolution this turn, I guess because they wanted to adopt this tactic, right? So adopting the medieval army tactic gave them an extra 3... It gave them an extra 3 strength, so it looks like if they had done the Robespierre Revolution, they would have been too vulnerable to an aggression for me, and I'd already demonstrated previously in this game that I was willing to try an aggression even without being guaranteed it would succeed. So that's also, I guess, a hidden benefit of, you know, being a little more loose with your aggressions, in that it shows your opponents that you're willing to try aggressions if you can, which forces them to play suboptimally sometimes, like in this scenario. Age 3 begins, and why don't we take a look at everyone's situation? I forgot to do it at the end of Age 1, but basically at the end of Age 1, I think no one looked like they were doing particularly well or poorly. I think Age 2, though, went very well for me. I kind of got most of what I wanted. My only real weakness at this point is my farm situation, but even then, like, Barbarossa had given me so much value and so many, you know, and so much population that I don't really need more food production soon. I have most of what I want already. Obviously I'm strongest, my economy is looking good, so I was quite satisfied with my position overall. Cleveland's position is going to look worse once the war gets resolved. Unfortunately, while Cleveland has some stuff going for them, like the Suez Canal, overall their position looks pretty bad. They weren't able to find a chance to upgrade their economy during Age 2, so their economy is looking quite bad. Their strength situation isn't looking great either. They're still in the phalanx. They'll be able to copy my classic army tactic at least once I play it, but even then, their economy, like I said, not doing well, and the Scientific Cooperation Pact is looking like it's going to help me a lot more than it's going to help them, unfortunately. Fat Hope's doing a bit better. They have the Ocean Line service going for them. Their economy is looking better. They're going to be able to do a Robespierre Revolution soon. I think that my position does seem better than theirs, though. Not only in strength terms, especially once I finish Railroad, but also in economy terms. I'm going to have more rocks. I'm going to have more science. They never had a chance to play the scientific method, and they had to destroy one of their labs even. So, I think overall my position feels kind of significantly better than my opponents right now. And even in culture terms, I have about the same amount of culture that they do, and more production. So and we can see kind of the benefit of the Taj Mahal here, where without it, I would have had, you know, less culture, and maybe they could have tried to, like, culture rush me. But with the Taj Mahal, it's going to be much more difficult for them to just hope that they can win peacefully. So, yeah, I think I'm in this is one of the strongest positions I think I've been in in the World Championships yet, frankly, entering into H3, which kind of puts its own form of pressure, which is, yeah, I have the advantage. Can I actually like follow it through into a win? Anyway, the aggression didn't seem likely to succeed at this point, so I think I decided to cede. Yeah, I ceded the territory. After my war over territory against Cleveland, you know, now it was looking like more yellow tokens might be pretty helpful for me. So that's why I ceded the territory. I reveal the Age 1 version of the same territory. I could have bid more, obviously, than I did, but since I just ceded the Age 2 version, it doesn't seem worth it to pump a lot of bonus cards into the Age 1 territory. So I decided to only bid a little bit in the hopes to, you know, leech some resources out of my opponents. I kind of bid 5, not for any particular reason. It just felt like a decent bid. Well, I guess, yeah, I bid 5 so that my opponents couldn't win with just, like, 1 unit and 1 bonus card, right? This basically forces my opponents to either bid 2 units or 2 bonus cards. In the end, Cleveland wins it bidding 2 units, which is definitely a really significant cost to make, but it is also true that Cleveland was having some serious yellow token issues after my war, so I can understand their reasoning. However, one thing to note is because the foray was revealed that I didn't have knowledge of, I am able to both upgrade my 3rd mine this turn and finish the railroad with the engineering genius. So, well, I think definitely a case could be made that I didn't really need this 3rd coal mine theoretically, and I could have just destroyed it. And I think without the foray, I wouldn't have been able to make this upgrade this turn, so I probably would have just destroyed that mine next turn. Finishing upgrading it at the beginning of H3 still felt worth it to me, especially since I could do it with the rich land that I picked, you know, just in case. So, that unfortunately does mean that I am lacking the civil actions to take the computers, which would have been a nice card to take. So instead, I am forced to take 2 yellow cards. At least one of them is a breakthrough, which is a nice card to take for 1 civil action. The last one, I decided to take the frugality. I mean, I didn't really have a choice. I couldn't take the coal. I didn't want the scientific methods, really. So it had to be one of the frugalities. I decided to take this frugality here, I think mainly because I wanted to keep this revolutionary idea on 3 civil actions for Cleveland. Obviously, I have the scientific cooperation pact with Cleveland. Now, maybe you could say I should let Cleveland have the revolutionary idea so that they would be incentivized to keep the pact going. A little bit of an odd reasoning there, but now that I'm thinking of it, that actually seems pretty plausible. But maybe Cleveland is incentivized to just take the rev idea for 3 civil actions anyway. It's definitely a strong card for them. But I think the other reason was to keep the computers, hopefully at a high civil action cost, so that one of my opponents wouldn't take it, because I did really want the computers. I decided to play the classic army tactic mainly to be able to keep more of these cards in my hand. I think I wanted all of them. Well, not the Ravages. For reasons I already stated, I felt that, you know, Cleveland, was my competition more than Cleveland, and my Happy Face from Stonehenge, you know, seemed like it could be pretty valuable to me, whereas Fat Hope maybe... I mean, losing the science income from the library could definitely be pretty bad for Fat Hope, though. So, maybe I should have ceded the Ravages. I'm still not entirely sure of the relative value of the Stonehenge Happy Face versus the benefits from library, frankly. But, regardless, I kept these events instead, as well as the Spy, just in case I get a chance to use it. And I draw an Impacted Government, an Impacted Wonders, and a War over Culture. Cleveland Seeds reveals my prosperity, which helps me a lot more than my opponents. Cleveland upgrades a mine with the efficient upgrade and rebuilds the riflemen to compete in strength more. They're also able to get the military theory and the revolutionary idea to play it next turn. Looks like they're vulnerable, but unfortunately, losing so many units to the inhabited territory means that they're forced to be vulnerable to an aggression from me next turn, which I will take advantage of. Fat Hope does the Robespierre Revolution now. They're able to play navigation with it to threaten a defense. Well, they can't threaten a defense yet, but they are able to by building this bread and circuses. Now they can defend with just 1 bonus card. So as for my turn, it seemed very unlikely that Cleveland would be able to defend this spy aggression. And so, you know, even though maybe this will mean Cleveland will finally cancel the scientific cooperation, it still seemed way too strong to pass up to just get this 5 science. Like I said, Cleveland would need 2... Yeah, even an age 3 bonus card and an age 2 bonus card would not be enough. Cleveland would need either 2 age 3 bonus cards or like 1 age 3 and 2 age 2 bonus cards. That seemed quite unlikely, so especially with them only having 3 age 3 draws. So that's why I was pretty confident that the spy would go through. And the science will be especially valuable to me because I decided to take Steve Jobs. I think at this point, my economy is so powerful compared to my opponents that I can almost do anything to win the game at this point. But with Steve Jobs and computers landing in my lap for 1 civil action each, Steve Jobs, I think the situation I'm in is pretty much perfect for Steve Jobs. It's not totally perfect because I don't really need the happy faces from him, but with 13 rock income, soon to have computers, I'm going to be able to get a lot of culture from him. I think comparing Steve Jobs to Einstein, who is the most obvious comparison, definitely Einstein most of the time is the stronger leader by a pretty significant amount, because not only does he give you he gives you extra science to pay for the text that you want to play for him, and he also doesn't cost the resources to play. However, I think when you have the resources to pay for Steve Jobs, which I certainly do, getting that 1 more culture per tech, that can really add up. Like, if you play, you know, if you get like an extra 5, 6, 7 culture from him, which is definitely possible, if not likely, like that can, you know, that's a fairly substantive amount. I think the real use value of Steve Jobs does kind of come from when you get more happy faces with him, or when you need the happy faces that he provides, which again, I don't really. That being said, so maybe I still would have preferred Einstein, but there's no Einstein in the deck. And there, you know, there's 3 leaders in the deck. Gandhi, I really didn't need. I wasn't scared of my opponents militarily. Fleming, I'm not in a position for. So I decided that now was as good a time as any. You know, I didn't really need the strength from Napoleon anymore. I'm still going to be strongest without him. So I decided it was time. Let's get some culture going. I'm able to upgrade 2 labs into computers, which leaves me with 1 civil action to go, and I can use it to increase my population. I just spent a lot of time thinking, do I want to use this frugality? And at the end I decided not to use it. It would only give me 3 food, so it's not clear when that food would be able to come in handy for me. Once it did, if it did, it would probably be because I got some mechanized agriculture, and I can always use it with the mechanized agriculture once I have it, instead of leaving 3 food lying around doing nothing but making corruption more of a potential issue for me. As for the cards I keep, I do want to take the bonus cards because I have the inhabited territory in the deck. I want to keep the war just in case it becomes useful, and so the question is just which of the other cards to take, and I think I ended up keeping the impact. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, Independence Declaration, you know, seemed like it would probably hit Cleveland. It would definitely be quite bad for Cleveland, but again, I wasn't really concerned about Cleveland at this point. I was concerned about Fat Hope. Fat Hope doesn't have any colonies in play, so it didn't seem too worth it. Cold War could potentially be useful for me, but because I mean, Cold War with Steve Jobs seems nice, but I have a ton of science going with Steve Jobs right now. So again, it seemed like Fat Hope would also be a party of the Cold War, and Fat Hope definitely needs the science more than I do. So I decided that those 2 events maybe wouldn't actually help me win the game that much with those considerations, whereas the Impact of Wonders is at least a positive impact for me. The impact of government was not. And I draw another war, as well as an impact of colonies and a loss of sovereignty. Cleveland plays the revolutionary idea, builds a cannon, and plays a modern army tactic to now actually become strongest, finishes upgrading their farms, and takes some yellow cards. Fat Hope takes some yellow cards, as well as the first copy of Air Forces that Cleveland, I believe, had passed up. Fat Hope is able to both upgrade a lab and 2 warriors to now compete more in strength, and increases the population. Don't really have any strong objections to either turn. I decide not to seed because I'm weakest. And I could have maybe offered the loss of sovereignty, but like again with me having the railroad and soon to be the mounted infantry, I wasn't really worried about wars for my opponents. And probably neither opponent would have accepted to be the minus culture part of the loss of sovereignty. So I decided just not to use my politics phase this turn. Instead, take the space flight. Obviously, the space flight is a really, really strong wonder for me with my civilization. The downside is it means that I can't build units this turn. Well, I mean, take the communism, obviously. Not only do I have the science for it, and the happy faces for it, but the 1 extra rock income will help Steve Jobs out even more. And it leaves me with 2 civil actions less to take the modern infantry. Because I took the wonder, I am not able to upgrade modern infantry this turn, so that does leave me weakest for another turn. So I did consider passing up the wonder and maybe aiming for another one. The Empire State Building, for example, at, you know, maybe the fast food chains would be available to me next turn, though one of my opponents could definitely take it. That said, the Empire State Building looks to me like definitely a possibility. I should be able to win rocks and science. I might be able, right now I'm winning rock, science, and culture. I might be able to win strength 2 with it, so I could actually get a fair amount of culture off of the Empire State Building. That being said, the spaceflight is a much more consistent wonder, obviously, and at this point, again, I felt like I was so far ahead of my opponents that I just might as well take the wonder that was on the road for me already, that I knew I would be able to get. And I felt that, you know, even though I'm going to be the weakest for a turn, it's probably okay, because I can survive being hit by 1 or even 2 strength events, I think, and I'll be able to get more strength next turn. Well, actually, yeah, I actually forgot. Yeah, I'm actually able to not even be weakest because I can build a knight with my free population and then switch back to medieval army without losing any draws, thanks to the communism. So yeah, this, you know, I'm gonna be copying the classic army back again next turn, so I'm sort of copying tactics back and forth, which is usually not what you want to do, but when you have the military actions for it, like I do, there's kind of no reason not to do it. So with being able to do this, I think this made it decisive for me in taking the space flight this turn. I discarded the impact of colonies because I only have knowledge of 1 colony in the deck, so it was going to be a less value impact for me than the impact of wonders. I maybe could have discarded the war instead, but, you know, I don't know. I never really want to... It's always hard to justify discarding wars. Impact of the pact of the loss of sovereignty also, I think, is a potentially game-winning pact in certain situations. For example, if Fat Hope starts really pushing strength, a little harder with the Republic, but maybe possible. If Fat Hope starts really pushing strength and Cleveland is looking weak, then I could offer the pact to Cleveland, potentially to make sure that Fat Hope can't war them. So, I wanted to leave that option open. And, yeah. Anyway, Cleveland Seas reveals an iconoclasm. I didn't have knowledge of this, but that obviously rewarded me for replacing Napoleon so quickly. Cleveland decides to take a happy face solution that they really need. Finishes upgrading this mine. I'm not so sure about this, frankly, because they're spending 3 rocks to upgrade it, and there probably is going to be only 3 more turns left in the game, so this isn't actually going to give them any rocks to do. I think they probably should have just destroyed this mine. They already have rock income help from the Suez, and spent that population on something else. Anyway, yeah, moving on. Fat Hope adopts my classic army tactic to become strongest, takes that fast food chains, as well as another urban growth, looking to play, I guess they already upgraded the 2nd lab, so maybe some other urban buildings at some point, as well as the 2nd military theory. For my turn, I am now not the weakest in my turn, so I decided it was safe to cede that impact. I reveal politics of strength that thankfully I am not hit with. So now I readopt the classic army, and we can see doing that lets me play the Wave of Nationalism for 6. So like I said, you can almost always find a way to get value out of this wave of nationalism. It just might take a while. Definitely took me a while, but I did find a use for it eventually. I can upgrade 2 units to minor infantry, now making me strongest by a fair margin. I am also able to upgrade 1 mechanized agriculture. That definitely seemed worth it, you know. Get some food income going. I actually upgrade 2, so that combined with the frugality, which again, you know, wasn't useful for a while, but will be useful for me next turn, I'll be able to increase my population twice next turn. So that definitely seemed very strong. I think this is all pretty clearly right to do. The question is only what to do with my remaining 2 civil actions. But again, that also seems pretty obvious. Taking the engineering and the multimedia. I don't really need the multimedia, frankly, but I think the main reason is just that they are 2 techs, right, that I can play next turn, potentially, unless Cleveland cancels the scientific cooperation, which, frankly, Cleveland probably should cancel the scientific cooperation at this point. But if they don't, then I'll be able to play both of them next turn. And, you know, just, again, you know, with me having spaceflight and jobs, obviously, the more text, the better. I could have taken the revolutionary idea, which normally, you know, you would want with me needing so many texts for culture, but with me having so much science income already, it felt a little bit redundant, and I prefer just guaranteeing having these texts in my hand that I could also use for more science by building multimedias. I discarded the tactic that I wasn't going to use, as well as, I think that was an aggression, was it? As well as the loss of sovereignty. I think at this point, though, that was a mistake, and I should have discarded one of these wars. I'm almost certainly not going to use both of them. But, yeah. Anyway, that was a mistake. I draw a 3rd war, as well as impact of variety and an impact of strength. Cleveland takes a bunch of yellow cards. I guess can't really do much with their civilization because they lack so much science. With Cleveland not ceding either, I think Cleveland definitely should have canceled this pact this turn. Fado offers me an international tourism. Usually not one that you reject, but I think in this situation was a reject part for me for 2 reasons. First of all, obviously I have 1 more window than Fat Hope does, and in addition, Fat Hope plays after me, so Fat Hope would have gotten 1 more round of cultural production out of it than me, and so this would have been a significantly better pact for Fat Hope than for me. And even though Cleveland is slightly ahead of culture than Fat Hope, I felt that with Cleveland having such issues with their, you know, unhappy population and with the science production, and with Fat Hope having the ocean liner service, I thought that Fat Hope, even though it looked very unlikely that Fat Hope would be able to win this game at this point, it was maybe possible. Fat Hope does have the wonder, too, to compete with me a little bit. So I thought that if, you know, again, you know, probably my win was decided at this point regardless, but if it wasn't, then Fat Hope would be the player to beat me. So I didn't want to give Fat Hope more help than I needed to. Anyway, Fat Hope plays Pierre now to even, they'll be ahead of culture in Cleveland next turn even, as well as reserves and pro sports. Plays the military theory to finally get more military actions going, and is indeed able to become strongest. On my turn, I go in and seed, which impact was that? I forget now, but yeah, basically a positive impact for me, and I'm not weakest, so I reveal the freedom of movement. So at this point, I was actually a little worried about a potential war from Fat Hope, because I am not going to be getting the 2nd copy of Air Forces, probably, right? I mean, maybe it won't be revealed during Cleveland's turn, but there is a good chance that would be. So if Cleveland is able to get that copy of Air Forces and I can't have it, then a war from Fat Hope could be pretty threatening. They will be able to, with the reserves, potentially build 2 Air Forces next turn. Let's see, they'll have 15 rocks. Yeah, so, and there's the freedom of movement that just got revealed notably. So thanks to the freedom of movement, Fat Hope would actually be able to, say, move selective breeding, move one of these populations to one of these buildings to a rifleman to get 2 2 full classic army tactics, as well as 2 air forces with the reserves. And that's threatening a pretty substantial amount of strength, actually. So I was kind of worried about a war from Fat Hope against me. That felt like the one way that I might not be able to win this game. And so in order to help guard against that possibility, I decided to take that freedom of movement and move my agriculture to a warrior. You know, I probably wouldn't want a third mech ag anyway. And by moving it... Oh yeah, I think it was the impact of harmony that I see. I'm pretty sure. Sorry. And by moving this to the warrior, I'm able to save 2 rocks and 2 rocks on it without committing to, say, moving it to a modern infantry, for example. So basically, saving 2 rocks to put in the military just in case Fat Hope decides to war me, but I'm not actually spending any rocks, so I'm not committing to putting a bunch into military if Fat Hope doesn't war me. And, you know, I figured I should, you know, I will definitely be able to get 2 full classic army tactics going, which I think Fat Hope would be able to win the war against me, most likely. I haven't actually done, I can't recall if I did calculations. I haven't done calculations now. But with me having 2 full classic army tactics, they should at least not lose enough culture to Fat Hope to not win the game, I'm pretty sure. I guess, yeah, I think I must have done calculations because I felt these two multimedias this turn. But yeah, with 20 rocks, I will be able to upgrade both of these and build a 4th knight pretty easily. So, and I'm also taking the satellites for a little bit of extra potential strength. The satellites will also be useful for impacts, obviously. So yeah, basically I set myself up to defend as well as I can with air forces to hopefully still be able to win the game even if Fat Hope gets a war against me. And if Fat Hope wars against me, I won't be able to finish my wonder, but also Fat Hope wouldn't be able to finish their wonder if they war against me. So it would at least cost Fat Hope some amount for the war, whereas I would be able to, I would just need 1 free population to put into my military. So I think even if Fat Hope won the war against me, I should still be able to finish first. And I just take attack. I draw an impact of agriculture. Cleveman takes Marie Curie, builds a pro sports, and takes computers, potentially for Marie Curie. The military buildup is able to Cleveman be able to threaten 2 modern army tactics next turn. Notably, they don't actually take the air forces though. So with me potentially having access to the air forces, that should be decisive, and Fat Hope not warring me. Fat Hope could maybe consider warring Cleveland, but Cleveland is able to get 2 full modern army tactics going, so maybe it wouldn't be too big a war anyway. Regardless, Fat Hope doesn't actually war anyone. Maybe they didn't draw any wars, but they do offer the international tourism to Cleveland this time, and it's accepted. So Fat Hope is that upgrade, I think, for they build... No, they upgrade an arena to a pro sports, and they take some yellow cards in preparation for the fast food chains. So my turn is pretty straightforward. I see the impact of agriculture. It'll be the strongest impact for me. A colony is revealed, and so I basically had to figure out how much can I bid on this colony, how much can I win the colony for and still be able to defend against an aggression from Fat Hope. Because, you know, a colony this late, especially with me having knowledge of impacts of colonies that I didn't seed, is not that useful. This would probably just give 7 culture. So, there's no reason to risk an aggression just to win this colony, and I figured out that 9 is the amount that I could spend on the colony without being vulnerable to an aggression from Fat Hope, while still doing the other things I want to do this turn, namely finish my wonder. Anyway, Fat Hope ended up winning this, which I was pretty okay with, for reasons already stated. Obviously, you know, colony being revealed before I played satellites, you know, was a little unfortunate, but it was also, again, fine. I'm able to play 2 more technologies before finishing spaceflight. That leaves me with 2 rocks left, which I use to build a farm. Not only does this help me a little bit with impact of agriculture, but it also helps me with impact of potential impact of Harmony, or I think I suited the impact of Harmony. Sorry, I can't remember anymore. But yeah, it helps with 2 impacts, so I think it was the best use of those 2 rocks. And then I just take some cards. Cleveman plays the endowment, upgrades some farms. Maybe building this farm was a little bit of a tell that there was impact of agriculture. Or maybe there was just no better use that Cleveland saw for their resources. And Fat Hope, with those 3 reserves, is able to build an Air Force as well as a Knights to, you know, pretty definitively win any possible impact of strength. Maybe this is also impact of competition. Was seeded by Fat Hope, or maybe just they were hoping that one of them was. Unfortunately for them, I had drawn the impact of strength. And so now, before the impacts are revealed, we can see that thanks to thanks to me getting a whole bunch of tech Steve Jobs and the space flight, which gave me, let's see, Fat Hope got 24 culture from their wonder, and I got 32 culture, so I got 8 more culture from my wonder, and a bunch of culture from Steve Jobs. Obviously, Fat Hope also got a lot of culture from Pierre, but not as much as I did. So for that reason, I ended up 40 points ahead of Fat Hope, whereas Fat Hope on their end is more than 40 points ahead of Cleveland. So would take a very unlikely sort of impacts, I think, for the game not to just end 1, 2, 3, but we'll see. The first impact is one that I think the impact of progress is the one that I seeded. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, impact of progress, I am able to win, so that puts me even further ahead of Fat Hope, and Fat Hope further ahead of Cleveland. Next is impact of agriculture, which puts me even further ahead of Fat Hope. Cleveland catches up a little bit with it. Next is my impact of wonders. This is a relatively even impact, but it still puts me further ahead of both of Fat Hope. And that's it. I actually think all 3 of those impacts were impacts that I had seeded. So this, I think, is probably my most dominant game. The first 4-player game, I know, that game was like a little closer to the end. This game, starting from like mid-age 2 or so, just felt like a very comfortable game for me, where, you know, I think that play where I did the Monarchy Revolution with Barbarossa and then taking the Taj Mahal with it, that I think that turn gave me like a lot of value and increased my position pretty strongly, and it left me in a place where I would be able to take advantage of age 2 cards when they came. And then the way I played age 2, with me being able to maintain being the strongest, and also get some economy upgrades going, I could put myself in a very strong position for age 3 with some culture from the Taj Mahal as well. And that left me in a place where I probably could have just done a lot of different things to win the game with my powerful economy. And the way that sort of fell into my lap was Steve Jobs with the computers and the spaceflight coming. So that's the path I selected. I ended up not doing any wars. I might have been able to get a big war going against one of my opponents. But Cleveland actually was ended up able to defend pretty well with them having the Modern Army tactic. Fat Hope 2 with the Air Forces. Fat Hope got the first copy of Air Forces. The second copy of Air Forces didn't come until the end of the game. So I did at times do some quick war calculations, but I was never able to find a place. Again, I think mainly because I didn't have an Age 3 tactic or an Air Forces. And you kind of need at least one of those, if not both, to get a big war going most of the time. And I also just didn't see any reason to. I felt that with me already having the culture lead, I could pretty comfortably just win peacefully without having to get involved with any wars. I think if Fat Hope had gotten a war on that last turn against Cleveland, I think me discarding the Loss of Sovereignty was a mistake, and that, you know, a potential thing I could have done, like on the second to last turn, was offer that pact to Cleveland to stop Fat Hope from being able to war them. Because maybe if Fat Hope had gotten a big war against Cleveland, but I think probably not, because in order to get a big war going, Fat Hope wouldn't have been able to finish their wonder. So probably considering that, I mean, the wonder gave them 24 culture. They probably wouldn't have gotten more than like 30 or so max from a war. So yeah, I think even a war definitely wouldn't have caught Fado up the 60 culture that I ended up winning by. So just, I think this is a pretty classic example of entering Age 3 with a stronger economy, with the strongest economy, and just leveraging that. I mean, I was fortunate, definitely, that Steve Jobs Computers was available for me so early in Age 3, but I think even if it wasn't, whatever was available to me on Age 3, I was in a position to take and use to win. Unfortunately, I didn't save my screenshot from right after this game. This game actually ended almost simultaneously with the last 3-player game. But yeah, as you can imagine, winning this game put me in an even better position to potentially win the group, but still not decisive. But if I am able to win the last 3-player game, then no matter what, yeah, if I won the last 3-player game, then no matter how the 2-player games go, I would win the group. But in order to be in that, you know, comfortable situation where I didn't have to worry about the 2-player game results, I have to actually win that last 3-player game. And a few spoilers, that last 3-player game is a much more difficult game than any of the previous 2. So, who knows whether I'll be able to win it or not? You'll have to watch the video to find out. Until then, though, as always, please let me know if you have any comment or constructive criticism on my video making or my gameplay. I'm looking to improve a lot on both accounts. And I hope to see you in my next video.